right. I believe we are live, and there's not much difference, so it's hard to tell. But everybody, appreciate you following us. We are continued on doing series as we campaign in the time of COVID. One of the things that has been arguably the hottest topic in the last few weeks is talking about race and race relations here in America. And I'm very honored today to have a special guest who, where I come from, a lot of my mindset is athletics, having an athletic background. And so today we're very honored to have the Iowa State legend and current member of the Utah Jazz. And most notably, Sage Rosenfels calls you the man. George, would you like to introduce yourself, I guess?
No, I just want to say thank you to you, JD, for, thinking highly enough of me to have me on here and, to have an open dialogue, about racism and social injustice and inequality. And I think that's huge, especially with elections, coming up, that I think the biggest thing that, I hope politicians can realize is that, that they're open to listening, to citizens and different communities, to have different people's voices be heard, because clearly, racism has been going on for a long time and some people still aren't being heard. So I think the fact that you're taking this time out to, have people on to talk about these things and make yourself aware of what's going on and educate yourself even more, I think it kind of motivates everyone else to kind of step up to the plate and educate themselves to realize what the heck is going on and how can we stop this and make this country the best place in the world.
Absolutely. And so much of one of the things I realized when I launched last cycle to run the campaign, I looked around and the average member of Congress last cycle was 58 years old with a net worth of $1 million. And I like to say that I was 20 years younger and about $1 million short of that average. But one of the things that I loved about, especially this moment, is the athletic activism, because athletes come from all different backgrounds. And I just remember when I was playing minor league ball, being in the bullpen, talking to my teammates about a wide variety of issues. And when we have politicians talk about these things, it tends to be the same point of view. And it's so hard to run for office because the system is meant for people who are wealthy and meant for folks who have a knock up in life often. And so for us to run, we run a very grassroots campaign. And so I really want to take this opportunity to lift up voices who may not always be heard. And one of the things in this district, we have a congressman who for the last 18 years has been very controversial and had a Confederate flag on his desk and has got stripped of his committees for questioning when white nationalism and white supremacy become a derogatory term. And so the biggest thing that I feel that we can do is lift up other voices. And so that's one of the major reasons. And just seeing what you're doing on Twitter and really having that discussion online, I think is very inspiring for me, for folks like yourself to do that. So thank you for your voice.
Yeah, no, 100%. And obviously, with my time in Iowa, obviously I was sheltered because, being an adult is totally different than being a college student, right? You're in college, everything is taken care of for you. You don't really, I don't want to say you don't really know what's going on in the community because you're within your own community. My biggest concern was, how was I going to get meal swipes? How was I going to get to practice on time? Yeah. And then when you realize as you get older and have responsibilities and pay taxes, and I look at my pay stubs and I'm like, who is FICA and why are they taking so much money from me? You start to kind of educate yourself in politics. And obviously, is it Steve King that was, Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate, that someone like that was in office for so long. I'm sure there were some good things that he had done for the state of Iowa, but the fact that, racism wasn't at the top tier of his list is kind of disappointing. And I read something the other day that was like, it's just because people notice, a racist, you know, is one thing, but if it doesn't break your chain with them, then that's where the real issue is. And I think, you know, playing, you know, professional sports and in the minor leagues, is that when you speak the same language as someone, so that'd be baseball, and when I see people on the court, that's basketball, you don't notice the difference in color, in ethnicity. You just notice that love of the same thing that you guys can both get along with and can relate to. And the thing that I've been trying to stress the whole time of this is, yes, I understand that there's a difference between my skin color and someone else's skin color. And that's a difference, but I can respect it. But I'm going to love the similarities between me and that person because I want the best for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we need to get as a community and as a nation, is really just love the similarities, but also respect the differences. And I know we'll get into this later, but with the whole thing that happened in Minneapolis, you know, with a white officer killing George Floyd was treated like an animal, and there was no respect in the difference of color there. And that can't happen as a nation, as a country, anywhere. That should never be accepted. And I think we just need to get to a point where, yes, we can see the differences between each other, but that doesn't mean I'm better than you or you're better than me. At the end of the day, we're all one common thing, and that's human. Yeah. I mean, we wake up the same, we breathe the same, you know, we do all these, we walk the same. The only difference is how we look. And that's supposed to be the beauty of it. If everybody looked the same, there'd be no beauty in life. And I think if you can respect the difference between everybody and love the similarities, we can all make this world a better place. But that starts with educating ourselves. Hey, can I take 2 seconds just
no
to
problem. Yeah. No problem.
I'll be right back.
No problem. Yeah. For everybody, I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in. I'm very excited about this conversation. As many of you know, our campaign is about bringing people together. It doesn't matter if you're white, black, or brown. Doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, Independent, Republican, or have never voted for. Our focus and what we're about are bringing people together to the betterment of this district and for the state of Iowa. And so I'm grateful that everyone is tuning in for us and having this discussion. I'm extremely grateful for George taking time out of his busy life to have this conversation with us tonight. And so you'll be back in just a second. And one of the things that I've been seeing too is on social media and throughout the whole state, it's pretty special to see, especially this district, the 4th Congressional District, a district that's been represented by Steve King for 18 years. We've had, I think, at least 14 that I know of, different communities have had a Black Lives Matter event. And that is so symbolic and just lifting up each other and being aware of each other. And it's very special to see. And that excitement and that enthusiasm. One of the things that we've noticed in our campaign is just a connection with a lot of these different groups. And what we're hopeful for is that folks are able to stay tuned and stay engaged. And if you want real change, it's getting this back to a democracy that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. And in doing that, we got to get people out to vote. And so that's this enthusiasm, this momentum that's happening right now. We need to make sure that this continues. And so that's a huge part of what we're hoping for and a huge part of what we're all about. So 1 second. Well, while we're waiting for George to come back, I do want show the importance of, you don't need to be an NBA player or run for Congress to have this discussion. I think what I'm hoping for in this discussion is to have folks out there in the community to have discussions with their neighbors and talk about how we can stand up against racism together. I mean, I remember going to school here in Sioux City, and every truck in the district, in the Sioux City School District, has a sticker that says, a bumper sticker that says "E-racism," and that is something we should continually to talk about, and how we can bring people together in our communities. I think that's a huge theme of what's happening right now, and so I challenge you all who are watching this to really find a way in your own community on how you can help each other and lift each other up. All right.
I'm back. Sorry about that.
No worries. No worries. So I think a good point of where we can start off from here is just talk about growing up a little bit in what was that kind of like for you growing up?
So not a lot of people know this. Well, maybe some more than others. But I grew up in Methuen, Massachusetts. With a mother and a father. My dad was actually born and raised in West Africa in a country called Senegal. My mom was born and raised in Draycott, Massachusetts, so they raised me right outside my mom's hometown. And as you can see, my skin is a lighter pigmentation than most, especially with my dad, being from Africa. So I never had to really grow up, with being judged or looked at differently, except when I was around, my father. They would ask him, "Oh, is this your son?" And I remember him picking me up from daycare, and they'd always ask if they could see his ID to make sure, if he was, my dad. But I grew up a pretty awesome childhood. My parents, I wouldn't say never let me go without, but made sure they worked as hard as they could to make sure I had everything that I needed to be successful. I went to public school until I was in the 8th grade, and then I went to a boarding school, not because I was a bad kid, but just smaller classrooms. Smaller classrooms were a better fit for me. School never came easy for me, so smaller classrooms allowed me to have a relationship with my teachers and develop from there. And I guess later we can transition into this, especially about the youth. But that was my biggest growth moment in high school. And I think that was from being at boarding school. The day started at 8 in the morning and ended at 10 at night. Wow. Classes were from 8 to 3. You'd have to do an afternoon activity, whether that was theater, weightlifting, basketball in the winter for me, or football in the fall. And you'd have dinner, and then you'd have some free time to socialize, with your classmates. The school was 250 students. And then you'd have study hall from 8 to 10. But, when my uncle was sending me there, and my uncle was a huge part of the development in my life as a young kid, he was like, my fear for young kids is when you go to public high school, you start school at 8 and end at 2. And then what interaction are you having from 2 to the time that you go to sleep? And that was huge for me. And I didn't realize it back then, but having those conversations, whether if it was with adults or my classmates, and being forced to do an afternoon activity, whereas public high school, you can kind of just go home and play video games and get yourself into trouble and not know what to do when you're 14 years old as a freshman. And those moments of growth happened after school. And they happened because I had so much interaction, with whether if it was my peers, adult teachers, or just people that I was playing sports with. And that's where I want to get, I'll transition a little bit. with our youth. And that's why I'm so passionate about, helping out young kids, is because whatever situation they are in, they didn't choose to be in it. And I think educating them to have more social experiences, more interactions, so that the first time they get out in life isn't the first time they're experiencing something. They can experience things to adults telling them stories. And I think that was my biggest growth, was having so many conversations with people that were older than me, learning new words, learning new things, and how to interact with different types of people, whether it was my peers or adults, was something that helped me going on, especially when I went to college, whether if it was trying to be well-spoken or not, or being a social butterfly, or not being, I don't want to say an introvert, because sometimes that's how people are, but it made me get out of my shell and really understand the environments that I was in, how to talk to different people, and what was kind of acceptable and wasn't acceptable.
Yeah. Yeah. And it reminded me of something that we were talking about before, about what sports can do for people. I just toured here in Sioux City. I read a stat, and I'm not quite sure if this is right, but I think we have almost 70% of our students have free or reduced lunch here. And we have a new sports arena here that's opening up that is really helping kids have an after school activity, and just so important with how I was raised. I mean, I talk all the time about what sports meant to me was, I didn't care where my shortstop came from, if it was the Dominican Republic, Delaware, or Texas. I didn't care who my left fielder voted for in the last election. We worked together for that common goal and that common good. And I feel a lot of that's being lost right now in America. And that's, again, I don't mean to keep on pushing the athletic activism part, but that's why I'm just so naturally drawn to it. And I guess one of the things, do you watch The Shop?
I do. I watched all the seasons. Trust me, I've had plenty of time to do so.
I think that's one of the best shows, because I mean it talks, again, it's athletes talking about their backgrounds and where they come from, because we all see the success side of things, but we don't see how everyone got there. And I think it really takes layers off and opens up people. And it's one of my favorite shows. And it often talks about race relations so I guess that couldn't go into, like, what does the NBA do? Because I'm seeing a lot more, and especially NBA players, talk about what's happening right now.
Yeah. I just want to touch on what you talked about with The Shop, with the open dialogue, going back and forth, and we both have athletic backgrounds. And when you talk about the one common goal, as a team, it's obvious. Like if you're on a baseball team, the one common goal is to win the championship. Just like if you're on a basketball team, the one common goal is clearly you want to be the last team standing. And I think what people need to see is, what is your common goal in life, right? Everyone has their personal goals, and then you have your goals of like how you want to be remembered and how you want to leave Earth when you somehow, some way, whatever creator you believe in, you disperse, from this earth. And I think that needs to be to just, what can I do to make this world a better place? And that should be your championship as a citizen and as a human. And obviously, as a politician, it's your goal to field all those thoughts and combine that into one, and where you can make that actually come true for some of these people who have ideas, who aren't going to be heard at their lower level. And you can bring that to DC and have people have their voice be heard. But I think sometimes in life we get so caught up in ourselves and how we've been brought up, and we forget what is right in the world and what is wrong. And I don't blame people, but it's easy to be influenced in the world that we're in now. Shoot, I can do everything in my life from one click on my cell phone, right? Sometimes I catch myself not even looking at the news, just looking at something on Twitter if I want to see if it's true or not. And you're so easily influenced, but that should never take away from, that everyone should be treated equally, that everyone has the right to, free speech and, the right to vote as a citizen. And I just think we fall short sometimes of that common goal, like we talked about with baseball and basketball, with that being the championship and the last team standing, is that making this place a better place, or better than you found it, or better than when you came in, that should be the championship for us. But touching on what the NBA has done, obviously, being a professional athlete opens up a ton of doors. A ton of people want to get to know you. I've had the opportunity to meet Roger Federer. I've had the opportunity to meet many people. Senator Mitt Romney was just on a Zoom call with us a couple weeks back, and I've gotten to meet a ton of people. I'm honestly having a brain cramp right now. I can't list them off, but it honestly, it opened my eyes to say that, I have a platform, and what I say matters to some people or a lot of people because of what I do. But with that comes a lot of responsibility. Now I need to educate myself as a man, as a human, to know what is right and the right things to say. And, there are kids that are looking up to me. And in this situation, the NBA has done a great job of opening a bunch of doors of, letting us talk to different people, whether those are civil rights activists, and how we can, use our voice and use our platform. And I know this is kind of a touchy situation, but, we were expected to go down to play in Orlando, and now guys are speaking out on whether if we shouldn't play and if we, this isn't the right time. And there's no better platform than right now for us. And I don't want to be insensitive, to people that are directly affected by these traumas that are going on in our country. But these are the times, like, where someone told me, if you feed, someone a potato and slip in a piece of bread, they usually just take it in. And so with our game is the potato, right? But if you can slip in, on the court, Black Lives Matter on the back of our jersey, and every interview we're touching on it and our feelings about it, I think people will start to learn, like, okay, well, people who just follow the trend will be like, well, they're saying that Black Lives Matter, and I'm becoming more educated just by watching them play and what they're saying. Maybe I should educate myself. And that's my hope with us playing. Obviously, you can't guarantee that, but, the NBA has given us a huge platform to where people are simply watching and listening because of what we do. Now it's on us as NBA players to educate ourselves, to do the right thing and help bring up our youth and educate our youth so that situations like this don't continue to happen generation after generation.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I just am looking around America and just seeing where the needle has moved just from, you think of Ferguson several years ago to what's happening now, and how NASCAR banned all Confederate flags, how the University of Iowa, the football program, has really been affected by this. And just where the it's been interesting to see where the needle has moved with this. But then I was a history major in college, and I'm not going to say I was the smartest kid, but at the same time, I was on the dean's list, and I was an active student. I'm not trying to, but what just blows my mind, being a history major, I love learning and all this stuff. I didn't know about the Tulsa massacre, and it took what has happened this past few. I think it was about 2 weeks ago. There was an athlete, a former Major League Baseball pitcher, tweeted out, did you ever learn about the Tulsa massacre? And it's the worst massacre and race relation massacre in U.S. history in Tulsa, Oklahoma. For folks who may not know it, like I didn't know it, and I feel horrible. And like I read, and I couldn't fathom how I didn't know about this. But that's part of everything that's happening. We need to be more educated. We need to understand where different people are coming from. And in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921, the Black Wall Street, it was a thriving community, and it was completely massacred. And it's something, it's, in order for us to progress in history, I think we need to understand our past and I know a lot of people only knew it because of The Watchmen. I guess I haven't seen The Watchmen, but there was an episode that it was in. And so it's just very interesting to see the moment and the time and everything. So I guess with George Floyd and now Rayshard Brooks down in Atlanta, but everything right now is back to George Floyd and what happened there. So I guess, do you want to talk a little bit about what that event meant for you, and did anything in your life change?
Yeah, I would say a lot of things in my life changed. You know, I can't even be, because when you bring up George Floyd, I just envision watching that video over and over again. And like I talked about, he was treated, you know, like an animal. And I think that there's no place for that in this world at all whatsoever, mistreatment. And I think what has been going on with police brutality needs to stop. And let me make this clear before I go into this. Do I think every cop is bad? No. You know, just like I'm not going to sit here and say like how people are projecting things and being like, well, every black person is a criminal. Like, that's just, it's very unfair. There's bad people, and there's just bad humans in every race. No matter where you look, there are just bad people. But the fact that police have authority and, you know, have power, and that's being abused, I find that to be a problem. On the flip side of that, there are a lot of great police officers that we don't see videos of them actually helping people, them kneeling at protests and bringing us together and uniting us.
Yeah.
But that being said, I just think that it's alarming that many people of color feel nervous to the point where they don't know what's going to happen with their life when they're, one, pulled over for a traffic stop, approached by a police officer, you know, stopped at nighttime by a police officer. They don't know what to expect. And I feel like that's an issue that needs to be addressed. And, you know, obviously, here's one thing that, you know, I talked to my mother about is, you know, I have trouble, you know, and I'm still educating myself on this, is police expect us to be in a community, and when something goes wrong, they expect us to come forward to them and tell them, hey, you know, this person is doing this and this is alarming. And we're supposed to do that as noble, loyal citizens. We're supposed to do that. But the thing that I find alarming is that when police officers are caught acting out of line, are they holding themselves to the same standard? And that's something that I really feel that something needs to happen with that going down the line. I haven't educated myself enough on defunding the police and different things like that, so I'm not going to speak on that. But I just think there needs to be accountability with those things. And what happened with George Floyd changed my life forever, because it made me realize I can talk about race whenever I'm comfortable talking about race, because I blend in, right? My pigmentation is white, and, you know, people who don't know me can think that I'm white, and I don't get judged for that. But when I need to, I don't want to say when I need to fit in, but when people accept me who are in a different race, they're like, oh, you're multicultural, and I can fit in whenever I need to fit in. But this really opened my eyes to where if I was caught in a situation where like I was fearing for my life, which I've never had to be in, like, how would I feel like? And I sat back and sat on the couch and made myself think. It made me feel hopeless. Like if I was one of those people, I would feel hopeless, because there's nobody you can turn to when the people that are supposed to be serving and protecting you are taking your life and mistreating you.
Yeah. I mean, that video will haunt, I think, all of us, or so many of us. And 8 minutes and 46 seconds. It just, I don't even know how to even.
It's disgusting.
This. But like, I'm a white dude from Sioux City, Iowa, you know?
Yeah.
And so like I'm really trying to figure out like I'm not here to overstep my boundaries, but at the same time, I'm trying to lift each other's voice. And so it's been something I've been trying to figure out how I can best fulfill what we're trying to do. And I thought just having discussions like this, and on Thursday, we're having discussions with NAACP leaders in the district and we'll have other things along the way. It's just we need to lift up voices right now, and so this is a huge part of why I just appreciate of your time. What in kind of wrapping up here, I want to be respectful of your time, but where do you think we can go from here? And along with that, like, what advice will you have? Because I mean, we got to be honest. Ames, Iowa, in the 4th district here, which Ames is part of, we're 91% white in this entire district. What are some things that you would have advice for people of color in a predominantly white area, and advice for white people?
You know, I'll speak on for people of color. I think with systematic racism, you know, obviously it's tough with it not being a level playing field, but I just challenge, you know, them it's going to be tough, and there are days that are going to be, you know, really a struggle for you, where, you know, being in a predominantly, you know, white area, you may not feel that you fit in, but you fit in more than you think. Everyone has a brain, everyone has a heart, and just never give up on yourself. And that's mainly advice, you know, for everybody, but I understand systematic racism, and that, you know, just always feel like you are equal. It may not seem like it is, but just continue to fight that good fight of wanting the best for yourself and the people around you. And I'm a firm believer that the energy that you put out, you have good energy, you know, coming back in. And what I want to see going forward is just a open conversation. And here's where the challenge comes, is if you are a white male or a white female and you're around another white male or white female that makes a racist comment, it is your duty to stop them from saying these things, and to point it out and say that, hey, that isn't appropriate, because that's the first step. Because everybody knows there's going to be a dinner where someone makes that comment and it's let go. And then that's when people start thinking, oh, this is okay. And then something else happens, and then they think that is okay. When we have to realize that when an act of inequality happens, it needs to be addressed right then and there. And I think it continues with educating people. And there's some people out there that are like, well, what can I do? And I like I stated right there, one, there's foundations that you can donate to. If you're not fortunate enough to do that, then I think it's your duty to treat everybody respectfully and show it with your actions, and getting out and volunteering. If you can't afford to do that with your time, then simply just do what I just talked about. When there's an uncomfortable conversation, speak up, because with you being silent, you're allowing this to happen. And if one person allows it to happen, then the next person next to you is going to think it's okay for it to happen. And then they're going to run into 10 other people and allow it for it to happen. So the fact that we're having the conversation, and that these protests are happening, peaceful protests, where people are becoming aware that, hey, this is an issue. Because I know some people sometimes live in their bubble, like when I was in college, where I just could only focus on what I was eating and when my next practice or game was. These are actual problems in the world that people face on a day-to-day basis. And if we can continue to educate ourselves, I'm just a huge proponent on educating and just knowing our history. Like you talked about the Tulsa massacre, you know, where a race was thriving and then had to start at zero again. Just realizing what these people are going through. We're not saying that, you know, you have to go over the top and be above and beyond and paint stuff on your doorway saying Black Lives Matter, but we just want you to understand that this happened, right? So please take into account that it happened, and try to help us get to a point where equality isn't looked at in a weird way, where, you know, people are like, well, I didn't get a head start with you. You start at the 50-yard line. I started at the 25. Because how it happened is simply unfair, but we can only look forward. Yeah. And looking forward, we need to continue to educate ourselves, realize that it happened, and now think, how can we make that better? And I think stuff like this, JD, is what you're doing, is the progressive way of doing that. Is, hey, this happened, and I'm educating myself on this, but I'm going to take a step for who I am and what I believe in to make this better for the people around me, because I believe having a great place for everybody is the championship, is the success that you get out of this.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Absolutely. And one of the things that I was looking at and thinking as a campaign, what can we actually talk about too? I think a lot of this comes from economic injustices. A lot of this, I mean, you look at our private prisons and the need to stop private prisons. I mean, we can go down a long rabbit hole,
Right.
but they're in ending mandatory minimums and things like that in the legal system. Those are all things that we're going to be pushing out as a campaign to fight these injustices on a much larger scale. But that those are all. I want to respect your time and just say thank you so much for your ability to come on here and chat with us. And also, I just very much urge you to continue with your voice, because when we first talked, I gave my favorite advice that I got from a Native American activist, from a member of the Winnebago Nation, who told me, JD, if you want change, you have to get uncomfortable. And once you get uncomfortable, you have to get others uncomfortable. And race is not an easy discussion to talk about, but we have to. I want change, you want change. I know a lot of people who are following this want change, and we have to get uncomfortable. We have to have these conversations, and if we want to improve. And I think the majority of people do want to improve. So
yes, no, thanks. Yeah, no, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it, and I love everything that you're standing for, you know, with your campaign, JD, and pressing people to get uncomfortable, talking about situations that need to be fixed. And I think this is a start, and I think this is you showing, you know, the people that you want this change more than anything, with having these conversations, and you truly mean it. Not a lot of people can get out there and have conversations, you know, with everyday people, and I feel like you're getting out there and doing it, and I just am thankful that you thought highly enough of me to have me on here and have this dialogue. It really meant a lot.
yeah, well, best of luck with whatever happens with the NBA, if you play, if you don't, but eventually you will. And just as a guy who played point forward growing up, just you're one of the few people who plays point forward, or at least in college. I just loved your style of basketball, and just
Yeah.
and then love you more as a person after this conversation. So
hey, JD, there's a question that can we answer one of them, or is that, or we not have enough time?
Yeah.
I want to answer that. So the championship is equality.
Oh yeah.
I think it's Athena. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, I think so. So the championship
is equality, right? Why is it so hard for athletes to talk about the bread and the potato is a piece, but why is it taking so long for more athletes and people to advocate? I'd love to address that one. Athena, that's a great question, right? And you wonder why it takes so long. And like I talked about, you know, we are on a platform because of what we do, right? People look up to us because the realistic thing is people look up to me because of what I do. And a lot of athletes have trouble speaking out on this. One, because some of them haven't educated themselves on this, and some of them feel uncomfortable of saying the wrong things and being publicly shamed. And you really, that's why I challenge everybody to educate themselves, is to know what you're talking about, because saying the wrong thing could, you know, pinch a nerve with someone else or a different race, and could really ruin your public image. And as professional athletes, we're told, you know, your public image is everything. And I feel like I'm educated enough on this topic with how I was brought up, how I was raised, that I can speak on it, you know, and have some points that, you know, matter and won't offend people, but they're firmly my beliefs. And I feel like some people take longer to educate themselves and really realize what's going on, and at first are nervous to get out there because of what the public will think about them. But I think the more conversations we have, you know, JD is putting it out here that I'm an athlete on here. Maybe more athletes will be, oh, George did it, so now I can speak out on it. And I think that's why JD, like JD said about, you know, was it the Winnebago tribe that the Native American told you to make other people uncomfortable, where we challenge other people that, hey, now you can talk about it. You know, you've put your, you know, and just continue to push each other to talk about it. So at the end of the day, we're all speaking the same language and loving the same similarities, but respecting all the differences.
There's one thing I would like to address too, is that, I mean, I was just so in tune watching The Last Dance. And one of the big hits on Michael Jordan is he didn't talk about race. But at that time, players who were very vocal about it were frowned upon. And so we live in a better time. I wouldn't say it's a great time, but it's a better than what we were. And so like I read the story about Craig Hodges and how he really was vocal about his beliefs, and he was blacklisted, to be honest. And so that was part of the issue too. But that's why I'm so thrilled that the NBA is so accepting right now and encouraging. And we have leaders like Steve Kerr and Greg Popovich who are very vocal about some of these things as well, and these injustices in the world. And so I'm more and more optimistic, but we still got a long ways to go. I would love to see Major League Baseball get out there and I mean, what we're seeing, I mean, just since George Floyd, you're seeing the NFL being more and more accepting. Who knows what's going to happen with Colin Kaepernick, if there's going to be an apology or anything like that. But like, it's amazing to see how the tide's turning on this, but we need more and more people to talk about this if we want it to improve. And so, George, I think the world of you, and just thank you. So
yes, no, thank you for having me on. Growth is not an immediate thing, but you know, slow and steady, you know, wins the race. And if we continue to grow, this world is going to continue to grow and be a great place for us to, you know, raise our kids and then their kids' kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, well, enjoy your dinner.
I will.
And, this is an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time and the lovely discussion. And
JD, thank you so much.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you. All right.